We bury the dead." This would now be the third time they will have done so. The massacre at Wick had not been the first crime committed around Caithness by the band led by a man known only as Alpin. But his crimes, and the brutality of them, were escalating, and Iain was losing his patience and any desire to hold to the promise he'd made to Robert Bruce that he would deliver the infidel to the Scottish courts. Iain McEwen's bloodlust for the devil Alpin screamed for Highland justice, in their own land and by their own hand. With great care, he lifted the body of the dead child up in his arms, clenching his teeth so hard he felt the motion in his neck and jaw. The wind slashed at her cheeks and eyes as she rose from her haunches at the beach. She squinted out at the sea and sky and considered the direction of the winds. It was never a good sign when they shifted, even if only modestly. Pivoting, she put her back to the churning water and walked toward the dark, frowning rocks which flanked the beach. She hefted the haul of shells and stones further up her arm, onto her shoulder. They clacked in response, shifting and moving inside the woven basket. She shouldn't have traversed so far, but had been lured, as always, by the possibility of just a few more further ahead. Stones along the river and shells down here at the shore, which had her now several hours into today's hunt. 'Twas an easy hike to make, as the river had no turns from its rise near the keep until its fall into the sea. She'd have remained, gathered more of the precious bounty, if only to have stayed away from the keep longer. But the wind had indeed shifted, and though she'd dressed with particular care for the cold, it seeped still through her many layers that she thought only a brisk return walk would heat her again. She'd cut the fingers off the heavy woolen gloves a long time ago, that her fingers were now red and stinging from the cold. She curled those cold fingers into the front of her cloak, drawing it tighter against her chin, holding the hood in place, and kept her head low, even as the wind was now at her back, marching along as the clouds above turned greyer and meaner. She followed the river, keeping to the west side of it, even at those points where it was thin and shallow enough to cross. To do so would put her instantly onto Mackay land, as the river was all that separated the centuries-old enemies of the Sutherlands. She was not a Sutherland, but a guest of a minor Sutherland family, as she had been for several months, while the betrothal agreement was worked out between her father and the great Earl of Sutherland, William de Moravia, on behalf of his nephew, Kenneth Sutherland. While she was in no hurry to have the terms defined and agreed upon, she knew that the matter would have been handled with more haste if either the Earl or her betrothed were not gone so long or so often from home. All her anxiety over her impending wedding, and the bridegroom himself, whom she'd yet to meet, might have only been kept at bay these last many weeks by the beach, and the sea, and the river. She'd found ease and escape here, and would be sad to be so far away from the shore when she did marry, and travelled with her husband to his holding further inland. She made no stops now on her return trip, would not allow herself to be enticed by any shiny and colourful stone, that the walk now took less than half the time. When the manor came into view, just as she passed a grove of tall, wind-breaking pines, Margaret Bryce turned right and followed a path whose grass she believed she herself had worn toward the home of Adam Gordon, a minor landholder, and his Sutherland-born wife, Elizabeth de Moravia. They had graciously served as hosts to Maggie and her father, and rather as intermediaries between the Earl and Kenneth and John Bryce. To Maggie's dismay, she knew the time was drawing near that she would soon meet her expected future husband. She'd heard tales of Kenneth Sutherland, none of them good, had tried to not be distracted or made distraught by them. Even now, she thought of the weather and what tomorrow might bring up onto the beach, and not at all